Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff and I'm your host, and the executive producer of this show is, of course, Rob McConnell. Now, folks, as if you listen to the show regularly, you know that we cover everything from politics to the paranormal, which, of course, is a lot of different subjects. It's infinite, actually. And I like the fact that the show is flexible, free-form. We just kind of wing it and talk about things, have some very interesting guests. We'll have a lot more exciting guests going forward, of course, very shortly. I'll announce those in the future. And some of these people are real true heroes from history. And hate to tease you and be vague like that, but they'll be on this show soon. So stay tuned. All right, today we're going to talk about a very unpleasant subject, but it's one that is extremely close to my heart. I have been the victim of what I'm about to talk to you about myself. And of course, I have lost some very dear friends due to this sickness and this crime that has been going on. You might say, well, what is he talking about? Well, what I'm talking about, folks, is the murder of journalists. Now, I'm a journalist. So on that basis alone, I've been a journalist since high school when I started my career as a reporter for the high school newspaper. I was published, in high school. I wrote a column for a magazine in New York, even though I lived in California. This was back in the days, for you millennials listening to this, where we used an actual typewriter, and we'd actually type out the letter, double-spaced, single, one-sided, the article. And we'd send it in to the editors in New York. It would take 3 days by first-class mail to get there. And we did the old-fashioned way, okay? There was no autocorrect, there was no internet, and you had to dig a lot deeper. Information was not as easily available. And as a long-time, especially investigative journalist since essentially day one, I've always been fascinated by things I don't know, and man-made mysteries irritate me. It doesn't matter what the subject is, because I find that there's no excuse for them. Well, back then, if you couldn't find what you needed at the local library, you had to really dig a lot deeper because, again, there was no internet. So having been a long-time investigative journalist, starting out, especially in the area of the paranormal, which was very controversial, especially in the 1970s and up to the 1990s, that's when it hit its peak with this millennial madness that had occurred near the millennium when there were New Age UFO cults like Heaven's Gate that killed themselves. There was another cult called the Solar Cross in Switzerland. Their followers were murdered, and they also committed suicide. I investigated the Billy Meier UFO cult in Switzerland, went undercover there, put my life at risk, had to hear people tell all kinds of terrible things about me which weren't true. I posed as a Billy Meier believer named Steve Thomas, as I wrote about in my book, Spaceships of the Pleiades, the Billy Meier story, which was published by Prometheus Books in 1995. It remains the best-selling expose of the Meier case of all time. Its conclusions have withstood the test of time. In fact, even Billy Meier himself has admitted that some of that stuff in there exposing him is actually true. For example, my book was the first one to publish his so-called time travel photos, where he supposedly went back in time and photographed primitive man, dinosaurs sitting on rocks, even though the eyes of the dinosaurs were clearly buttons, etc. They're actually made stills from movies. Anyway, all of that was exposed in there because I happened to become friends with the person who used to manage Billy Meier's UFO photo collection. And he had duplicates of the stuff made from the original slides and negatives by Billy Meier. And he gave me all those photos. The family did. And I stayed with them secretly for a while at the bottom of the mountains that Billy Meier lives on up at his cult up there in Hinterschmidt-Ruti. And posing as Steve Thomas, I got to hear people say, I asked about Kal Korff because my cover story was that I said, there's this really bad guy named Kal Korff who's over in the U.S. and I'm an American citizen. My name is Steve Thomas. Give me the data to use against him and I'll go back to the U.S. and I'll take care of him for you. No problem. And of course, they were very open to that idea. They loved it. They asked me to join their cult. I refused to do it because I couldn't keep up the Steve Thomas phony facade after I got back to the U.S. It was time to then get busy working on the book, which would take a while to complete. And then when they found out that it was me all along, at first they lied and said I was never there. They check their guest book, which everybody is forced to sign when you go to that cult, as well as show your ID. And they couldn't find my signature, Kal Korff. Well, that's because I didn't sign my real name. Duh, I signed it as Steve Thomas. And my signature is not legible anyway. It just is a squiggly. But anyway, they later admitted that I was there and that some of the stuff in the book was true. And when I asked about Kal Korff, they said we would have two reactions to him, as I mentioned in the book. We would either never let him in, the compound, or what I call their cult, or we would never let him leave. Wonder what that means. Well, I think you can figure that out. So when I read the papers as a fellow journalist, especially a bureau chief who covers the Middle East and Europe and the U.S., and Asia, I wear several hats, and my two main news organizations that I do work for are Daily World newspaper in India, been there for years. Also before that, Daily Post newspaper, was there for years. Again, thousands of articles written. And of course, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, which is this one. And I'm honored to wear these hats on these two different networks. It's an honor. So as a journalist, when I read that fellow journalists are being killed or murdered, it's heartbreaking. It makes you re-examine, at least my reactions to it, what it is that I'm doing. For example, am I doing something that might produce the same result? Now, I will tell you that during my life, I've been threatened many, many times with death. Even in writing, I have actually a collection of probably every death threat I've ever received in writing. The police have them as well. The U.S. government has them as well, as do other governments in countries I've lived in. It's part of the overhead, I guess, of doing what I do. And it's not that what I do deserves for me to receive death threats. It does not. First of all, I'm not that important. And secondly, I think that when you expose the truth, you don't kill a person when they expose the truth. What kind of logic is that? And when I hear that journalists are killed, my first question is, why were they killed? How were they killed? Under what circumstances? Because if you're not careful, you can make the wrong conclusion. For example, journalists are killed every year covering news events. If there's a natural disaster and that natural disaster claims the life of a journalist, that's just part of the territory, part of the job. That's not the same as some mafia figure or some criminal element or some politician or somebody who thinks he's special and above the law or some powerful ruler of a country who then orders a journalist killed, or maybe colleagues of that leader of a country orders a journalist killed. It's not the same thing. That's a very different thing. And when that happens, we have to, as a species, human beings, draw the line and say, this is not acceptable. You're not going to get away with it. And if you do commit such crimes, you're going to be held accountable. And that could mean that you'll be prosecuted, put in jail, and possibly executed with the death penalty. Now, I understand it depends on the country. I'm pro-death penalty. I believe that if Hitler, for example, were caught at the end of World War II, put on trial for crimes against humanity and genocide and starting World War II, etc., I believe he should be found guilty and executed. Now, I will tell you up front, I have no patience for bleeding left-wing liberal la-la types who say, oh no, we can't kill Hitler because, that makes us just as bad as Hitler. I don't even know where to begin to refute that argument because that statement destroys itself. Just like when people who hate Israel compare Israel to Hitler. My God, people who talk out their rear end like that have no credibility. There's no comparison, not even close. Even people who hate Donald Trump, who constantly call him a Nazi. Well, he's not a Nazi. His daughter's Jewish, hello, and his grandkids are Jewish. His son is a Jew. My God. Do you think Hitler would allow his offspring to be Jews? No. Do you think he'd be pro-Israel like Trump is? No. But yet these morons talk this way. Now, here's the thing. When you have a journalist who exposes something that needs to be exposed, we're talking corruption, crime, misuse of public funds, fraud, whatever needs to be exposed for the interests of the general public, for the global public nowadays, because it's an international global environment thanks to things like Twitter, Facebook, the internet, and so on. To just kill them because they're doing their civic duty when the so-called people in charge weren't doing it, they're part of the problem. You kill them and then nothing happens? Or maybe you find the killer, but you don't kill him and deliver justice. You just, stick him in prison for the rest of his life, give him 3 square meals a day, let him go to college online, earn a degree, write books, earn a living. I'm sorry. I don't think that if a person commits such a crime that they are worthy of keeping their life. The issue isn't deterrent, folks. The death penalty is not a deterrent for murder. If it was, there'd be no murders. No, it's about justice. And without justice, you've got nothing. In fact, you've got automatically injustice. So what we're going to do here is, after the commercial break, I'm going to start sharing with you some personal experiences I've had over the years as a journalist. And then I'm going to talk about 2 very high-profile cases, one of which is a recent murder of a Bulgarian female journalist, which is tragic. And then, of course, the latest murder, which is in the news, which is about Jamal Khashoggi, who, in that case, assuming he has been killed, it's a lot more complicated than the mainstream media is misleading you to believe. We'll be right back.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Kal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is, of course, Rob McConnell. Now, folks, the subject of today's show is a rather morbid one, but it's important, and that is the murder of journalists, which is, again, the murder of innocent people. And in this case, the journalists are doing their job. They're doing a service to humanity. You can't have a free democratic society without a free press. In fact, I argue that you can't have any civilized nation who claims to be civilized without having a free press. So as a journalist, let me recap some of my experiences over the years that have happened here and there, and then we'll cut to these other two latest murders that I've talked about, mentioned in the last segment. First of all, when I was growing up as a kid, and journalism became a passion of mine in writing, everything from poetry to stories to, of course, investigative journalism, which is what I love to do best. I love to investigate and find out new things, whatever they are. I started out in areas, of course, that were very controversial, and I did that because they were the most challenging. I mean, the paranormal, if it really exists, and I'm skeptical that it does, that's a lot more challenging than the so-called normal, right, by theoretical definition. In fact, I'll be blunt with you. I don't believe that there is a paranormal, and I'll tell you why. The very term itself is an oxymoron. If there is a paranormal as people describe it, meaning there are people out there with real psychic powers and in contact with aliens and whatever, that's not paranormal. It's actually normal. It's just something we haven't discovered yet, okay? We have to remember that back in time, when people used to believe the earth was flat and that man couldn't fly and other superstitious nonsense, when they were able to do it, or the very idea that they could, would have been considered radical or paranormal at the time, outside the normal, even though it ended up being the normal. The reason that airplanes and rockets work is because they use normal physics. So the universe cannot be an exception to itself. So from that standpoint, which is where I'm coming from, there is no paranormal. If there's something out there, ghosts, whatever, afterlife, that's normal. We just haven't proven it yet. And I got news for everybody. We're never going to know everything. We'll be dead before we could possibly do that. And we'll never live long enough to know everything. And everything includes all the stuff that happened in the past, which we don't really know most of because we weren't there. So getting back to the point, I started in the paranormal, and this is in the freewheeling 70s, where you had people like Uri Geller, you had all this psychic stuff going on, you had this era of flower power and the hippie stuff going on from the 60s and 70s, and the New Age movement kind of found a very fertile ground in that. I remember going to many places as a kid and seeing everything from quartz crystals to beads to all kinds of stuff like, pyramids in people's houses and people burning incense and wearing charms and amulets around their neck. And I'd ask them, why are you doing this? Why do you dress this way, etc. I was just curious, because I'm a jean and t-shirts type guy. And they'd say, I sleep under a pyramid because it will help me live longer. It deflects the cosmic rays. And I'd say, well, let me see. And I'd go in their bedroom and I'd look at this wire-framed pyramid above their bed. And I'd ask him a simple question, because I loved physics and astronomy. I'd say, well, your pyramid is made of a wire frame, like a coat hanger. How are you going to stop cosmic radiation from hitting you when there's nothing to block it? I'm just curious, what kind of new scientific discovery did you make that nobody knows about? Because you should really share that with people. And of course, they can't answer the question because it's a bunch of nonsense, okay? And then there were people who could, meditate in crystals and channel the dead and do all this other stuff. It was ridiculous because nobody could ever do this under scientifically controlled conditions. So what happened is, in the case of UFOs, I noticed there were two things in the UFO field which are even worse today, shamefully. And that is that it's a very binary type field, if you will. Although it's not really a field, it's more a hobby. There is no such thing as the field of ufology. It's not a legitimate scientific field. There are no standards to be a ufologist. That's one of its problems. People would either say, you're a believer or you're a skeptic. They didn't seem to have a lot of tolerance for somewhere in between. And as I got to know very famous UFO researchers, people like Stanton Friedman, for example, I got to know him when I was very young. In fact, I met him first on May 7th in 1975, or May 8th, I'm sorry. And I went to see him lecture. And this was at Thornton Junior High School in Fremont, and I'm in the 7th grade. And Friedman would say things which he still says today, has said for decades, since day one, that, skeptics are close-minded, that he likes to use the phrase, don't confuse me with facts, my mind is already made up. Well, I got news for Friedman and others who parrot this nonsense. The word skeptic simply means to be skeptical of something, and Friedman likes to call them debunkers. And Friedman has tried to rewrite the English language and say that debunking means you're closed-minded, don't confuse me with facts, my mind is already made up. Well, folks, in the real world, I would encourage you to open a decent dictionary and look up the definition of debunker. I did it. I've cited it for years. And debunker simply means, and let's think this through for a minute, to take the bunk out of something. Debunk. Duh, hello. I mean, everyone knows what decaffeinated means, right? It means there's no caffeine in it. It's decaffeinated, okay? If you whatever, you take it out. So if I debunk something, I'm taking bunk or BS or nonsense out of a subject, separating fact from fiction. Why is that a bad thing? You would think that people like Friedman, or people who claim to be after the truth, would welcome separating fact from fiction regardless of what the ultimate verdict was, even if they didn't like it. Because that's what people who love the truth do. They accept the facts, even if they don't like them. And we learn and we grow from that. So when people accuse me of being a debunker, and I know they mean it in the Friedman sense, I take them to task. You can check my Facebook postings. I always ask them, what do you mean by a debunker? Because I want to know what they mean. And 90% of the time, these UFO believers will simply ape what Friedman says. It's like they don't have a brain for themselves, can't think for themselves. And they say, oh, it means you have a closed mind. It's like, hello, do you even speak or know or understand the English language? Are you that closed-minded? So when I explain to them that debunker is actually a good thing, then it kind of gets weird from there, because then I get accused of being a CIA or disinformation agent. And I'll show you how bad it got here. These are real examples from history. When I wrote the Meyer expose, which started out as a simple article for Saga UFO Report, which they published as a main front cover story in the December, I think it was 1980 issue of their magazine, it later evolved into a book because I kept getting more data. And Bill Moore, the original author of the Roswell Incident UFO book, who was a friend of mine, he was my publisher back then. He published my first Billy Meyer expose through his labeled WLM Press and Townscribe Press. And what happened was, at that point, many people in the UFO field began to hate me. Now, here I am exposing a hoax, and now all of a sudden that makes me a bad guy. Now, if that isn't an example of how twisted UFO dumb is, as in D-U-M-B, I don't know what is. Because most people didn't even believe in the Meyer case who were attacking me for exposing a hoax. And that is even more bizarre. So I asked them what their problem was. And then they began to tell me, well, you don't believe in any case. And I never said that. I never said that. In fact, guess what, folks? I had my own sighting with 2 other witnesses, which still remains unexplained today. And that sighting occurred the night that we had just put the Meyer book to bed. I wanted nothing to do with the subject of UFOs. I wanted a break for 6 weeks before Bill's published my book came out. Bill's, again, Bill Moore publishing my book. Al Reed had done the graphics at Publication Professionals. I was in the car with Al and Barbara Reed on the way home from Sunnyvale. We had just put the book to bed, was sending it to Bill Moore so it could come out in 6 weeks. And all of a sudden we see a UFO on the way home. And the sighting was 11 minutes long, maybe 12. Written up, reported at the time, investigated by NASA employees, Dr. Richard Haynes and Dr. Andrew Grotowski, who are friends of mine. Knew them, again, when I was in high school. And that sighting remains unexplained, and it was one of dozens in the area for the next couple of weeks. There was a mini UFO wave there. I investigated some of those reports as well. And what I saw briefly was a round sphere that was red. It was about the size of the head of a match if you held it at arm's length, maybe a little smaller. It was solid. There was no variation in it. It just hovered, didn't move. And because it looked so unusual, we pulled over on the side of the road and watched it, because Barbara said, "Look at that funny airplane over there." Al and I looked over. We said, "That's not an airplane." We pulled over and we watched it. And this thing hovered, didn't move, no noise. And then it seemed to shoot out or drop something, which looked just like itself, like split in two, only this smaller thing was this second piece that came out of it, this separated thing, like a cell dividing, if you will, was smaller and less bright. And as soon as this thing was ejected or dropped or split from it, whatever you want to call it, the main object took off, and the object that separated from it faded out or disappeared. As the main object then took off horizontally, now this is going from hovering to horizontally, we got in the car and we tried to follow it as much as we could. Unfortunately, we couldn't get directly under it for a while because we were limited by the roads. We weren't going to drive through farm fields. Wasn't going to happen. So finally, we're heading on east on Highway 237. And then all of a sudden, the object changes direction and heads north. We then got on Highway 17, which is the Nimitz Freeway, and started chasing it. We then ended up directly under it. And after the commercial break, I'll tell you the rest of the sighting.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. So, as I was saying, folks, when Al and Barbara and I were under this object, again, we had chased it. It's been 11 minutes so far, maybe 10. We were, at this point, chasing it north on Highway 17, the Nimitz Freeway. Now, we were not far from the GM, the old General Motors plant, which no longer exists. Today, it's Tesla. And at this point, we've stopped on the side of the road because we're now under the object. The object has stopped, and it's above us, okay? And it is between us and the cloud layer, which is low that night in the sky. And Al and Barbara are looking at it. I'm looking at it, and I start to turn my attention towards some cars to try to flag them down so that they can see this with us, because it's right there. But unless you look up, you're not going to see it. And of course, people have hoods on or roofs on their car, and they're not transparent. Not everybody has open convertibles. So I wanted to flag down people to get more witnesses, but at the same time, I have to watch the object at the same time. So I'm moving my head back and forth while I told Al and Barbara, don't take your eye away from that object. I'll flag some cars down. So what happened is this object then did 6 circles. It flew in 6 perfect small circles. It then rose up above the clouds and disappeared. That was it. So again, here's an object that we saw hovering in the sky over the waters of the Bay Area in the west. It then drops or ejects something or splits into whatever you want to call it. The second thing, which was not as bright, disappears. Then the thing speeds away. We chase it in the car. There's absolutely no noise. Very quiet night. We end up stopping because it stopped, and we're now directly under it. And again, it did these 6 circles, and then it flew straight up and disappeared. So we thought, wow, what are the odds of this? And I remember being with Al and Barbara, and Al asked me, what are you feeling right now? And I said, Al, I'm frustrated. I wish I had an airplane. I wish I could go up there and chase it, get closer. He says, let me get this straight. He's telling me this while we're both looking. He says, this thing comes from God knows where. It's God knows what. We don't know. And you're going to get in your little pissant airplane and go mess with it? He didn't use the word mess. He used the F word instead. And I said, yeah, that's kind of stupid, isn't it? I said, but do you know how frustrating this is? And do you know how weird this is, that this should happen on the very night that we're burnt out on the subject and we want nothing to do with it? We got a 6-week break before the Meyer book comes out, and now we have a sighting. I said, do you know what's going to happen if I don't report this? If I do report it, I'm screwed either way because, I could just see the headline now in the local papers, UFO guy sees a UFO. I mean, I can't win either way. Well, we decided not to report it, okay? Even though I knew all the guys from MUFON, saw them regularly, etc. They're very good friends of mine. But the next night, around 5:30 in the evening, when the evening news is ramping up, I'm turning the channels. And all of a sudden, it was Eyewitness News on CBS, Channel 5. They interrupted and they said, hey, there's a UFO event going on, meaning there's some sightings. And there's Dr. Andrew Grotowski out there investigating this, Dr. Richard Haynes. And people were describing the same thing we had seen the night before. And then for the next several weeks, this thing was seen during the day, during the night, for weeks at a time. And then the sighting stopped. And I investigated with the MUFON guys sightings that occurred during the day. I didn't tell the witness when I met them that I had seen it at night. I didn't want to investigate the night sightings because I wanted to be objective. So I ended up interviewing and going to the house of a witness who saw this thing through binoculars during the day. He said, yes, it was red, but he said under the binoculars he could see a reflection of what appeared to be a metallic spherical surface. And you have to be careful with that because sometimes your eye can trick you into thinking that's what you're seeing. On the other hand, I believe, based on my memory and Al and Barbara's, that there was a slight metal reflection behind this as well. But because we saw it at night, we didn't have binoculars, I can't be 100% certain. What I can tell you is that Dr. Richard Haynes released his final report. The first entry in that report, which has all these unexplained sightings, is about a Mr. KK, that's Kal Korff, AR, Al Reed, and BR, Barbara Reed, his wife. We're the first one there because we were the first to see this wave. And again, it was one of those things. What do? I wanted a break from the subject, but I felt that now that this thing is happening in my backyard, so to speak, and I've seen it, whether I want a break or not doesn't matter. I have a journalistic duty to do, an investigative duty, and I need to do this. And I did that for weeks. But the fallout from my Meyer investigation was essentially this. Wendell Stevens, for example, started accusing me of being a CIA disinformation agent, and that was the reason I had exposed Meyer. They even lied and said that the reason that I did it is because I was under 18 and Bill Moore was really behind it, and because you couldn't sue a minor, they used me as a puppet. Well, Wendell obviously wasn't a very good math student because I was 18, but independent of that, it was just pure nonsense. That was my book. I wrote it. You can tell from some of the English in there, it's mine. Bill Moore did help edit it, but it's my work. Now, I will tell you that Wendell apparently believed I was CIA so strongly, because he was a paranoid conspiracy nut, that when Wendell was arrested for child molestation and later served 7 years in prison on 3 counts, I blew open that story, published the legal indictments against him in my Meyer expose book. It was the first time the world found out about it. I leaked the story to James Mosley, who was the editor of Saucer Smear magazine when it was running for decades. He was a friend of mine as well. And Mosley later admitted it was me who told him, because after the book came out, I said, Jim, you can tell people. It's okay. And he did. Well, Wendell asked if I could help. Wendell wanted to know if I could talk to my CIA buddies to help get him off. Well, I didn't have any CIA buddies to help him. And besides, if he's guilty of child molestation, I'm not going to help him. I believe that if you commit that type of crime and he served time for it, that you need to pay the music, face the music on that. I'm not going to help someone get off on a charge like that. That's ridiculous. In fact, if you park illegally, I'm not going to help you get out of that ticket either, because I believe in following the law. That's just the way I'm wired. So what I saw was something in the UFO field that really scared me as a kid. And I figure if I could figure this out as a young me, who probably figured out the same thing, I hope, and that is that things were so polarized that the UFO subject was a religion to these people. If you didn't believe the case they believed in, you didn't believe in UFOs at all. It was all or nothing. And that's ridiculous, very ridiculous. And you see that today. If you don't believe me, try this simple experiment. Get on a forum about Roswell or any hot case that people really are extremist about, and just tell them you don't believe it or start questioning it. And then instead of addressing facts that disprove that Roswell involved the crash of an alien spacecraft and all that other nonsense, they'll start calling you all kinds of names. And ever since social media has taken over our society, it's become a lot worse. And my fear back then, which I talked about in many lectures, was that if this sickness is not contained within the paranormal, it's going to go mainstream into society. And that's exactly what it's done today. Look what so-called peaceniks are doing on the left, groups like Antifa. They're attacking people, hitting them with bicycle locks, splitting skulls, and yet they bitch about the violence of the right. Well, they're both the same. The right and the left are extremists. They're just on other sides of the spectrum, but they're both extremists. That's the point of the right. That's the point of the left. And that's why we have a middle in between, because it's not extremist. It's a simple scale. So this is what's happened today. And I'll tell you why this is relevant to the journalism issue. Having lived and been to in and visited 27 countries, having left the United States in the year 2000, 18 years, I have lived in countries where, as a journalist, you don't have real freedom. I'll give you a couple real examples. India, the world's largest democracy. I'll never forget one time I wanted to write an article about a book that was banned in India that showed very affectionate letters from Gandhi written to a man. Apparently, Gandhi loved this guy. Now, I'm not saying Gandhi was gay, but I was told point blank that I could not write that story, even though it was not a secret that the book was banned. It was banned because it criticized what I was told, Gandhi G. Okay, that's what they call him there. So I said, let me get this straight. The government bans a book because it criticizes Gandhi and shows what seem to be love letters from him to a guy. It's the truth. It's part of history. And you don't let me write about the fact that this has happened. No. Okay, fine. My counter argument was, well, the letters are in the Gandhi Museum in Delhi. Duh, hello. You can go see them. Are you telling me that I can't even go down there and take some video of them? What if I just talk about the Gandhi Museum and I happen to mention this little part of the exhibit here? No, can't do that. Can't criticize Gandhi. He's Mahatma. He's holy. No, he isn't holy. He was a simple human being, and he had some serious problems. Just ask relatives of his. He used to sleep with naked. It's kind of weird. You can dig this stuff up. We'll be back after the break.
The X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of Kal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. So here I am in India. This book has been banned because it said bad things about Gandhi. Or I don't know if it's a bad thing if you're just publicizing letters he wrote. If the letters make him look less than what you thought he was, that's Gandhi's fault, right? It's not the author's fault. But the book was banned. So I wanted to write a story about that, and I was told I couldn't. I was also told I'm not allowed to criticize Gandhiji. Okay, fine. This was not the United States. It was India. I got to go by the rules. In fact, before I came to India, I was told by the Indian government that I had to sign a statement that I wouldn't write or do any journalism for 6 months while I was there. So when I first arrived in India, I couldn't do my job for 6 months. There was no way I was going to break my agreement with them. And then when I got my 5-year visa and later my subsequent visas renewed, of course I was an accredited journalist. I was even investigated by Indian intelligence. I have a copy of that letter, by the way. For those who don't believe me, they can go, you know what they can do with themselves. It says I'm a good guy and I'm clear, ideologically okay, and all that other stuff. So the other thing I couldn't talk about was Kashmir, because according to the UN, it's disputed territory, but according to India, it's not. So actually, it's a crime in India if you dare to question whether Kashmir is disputed territory or not. It is a crime. You can be charged with treason or sedition. So there were some articles on Kashmir I wanted to do, which I couldn't do because of that. There were also areas I wanted to go into that I couldn't go into because I was a white guy, or what they call a Gora, and they would kill me. Okay, fine. So I wouldn't do it. Now, I will tell you my position on Kashmir. I think it belongs to India. I don't support Pakistani control of it at all. But when I was covering some issues with Pakistan, and I would try to write articles about the debate and whether India was actually going to finally act like Israel for once and go after Pakistan and actually defend themselves, I had to be very careful there. And I'm actually grateful to friends and editors who counseled me about what to do and what not to do, because I didn't want to get them in trouble, and I certainly didn't want to get into trouble myself. So let's now switch to the murders of 2 recent journalists. Now, before the recent case involving the Saudis and the Turks broke the news, there was a murder of another journalist in Europe, and this article did not receive the type of her murder did not receive the type of coverage that, of course, the incident involving Jamal Khashoggi has. So the fact is that in the last several years, the number of journalists who have been killed has been horrific. And I'm not talking about journalists who get killed in line of duty, where they might be out covering a war and a bomb falls on them accidentally. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about targeted killings, okay? Now, all the statistics are not in yet for 2018 because the year isn't over yet. But already, more than 4 dozen journalists have died in 2018. In fact, as many as 49 journalists have been killed around the world just in the first 6 months of 2018. Now, the most dangerous country by far in the world is Afghanistan. All right, it's kind of obvious why. Not only do terrorists target journalists, but There was a recent thing where they had suicide bombings that killed 9 journalists in one incident. Now, of the 49 journalists that have been killed, at least in the first half of the year, and the number's higher now, 4 were women. We can add another female to that, actually a couple more. There was another female journalist who was involved investigating corruption last year in Malta. She was murdered. There was a woman recently in Bulgaria, an investigative journalist. And what happened is she was murdered as well. In fact, in her case, it was even worse. She was raped and then killed. And she had just reported on some misappropriation of funds. She had just done a broadcast. And what happened is she was reporting on the misuse of funds, hundreds of millions of dollars worth, given by the EU to the Bulgarian officials. Apparently there was corruption going on. She wrote about it, broadcast about it, and then all of a sudden she's dead. Now, apparently police have a suspect in custody. It remains to be seen what will be known or unknown. Her name was Victoria Marinova, and very beautiful woman, a mother. She leaves behind her child. And unfortunately in the EU, if they actually have the killer and they convict him, this killer will never be put to death. This killer will have a nice, comfortable life in prison for the rest of their life, because that's what Europe does. It looks like it's like they haven't learned a single thing from their own bloody history. Now let's talk about the latest murder, apparent murder of a journalist. Apparent because there's still a very slight possibility that he might be alive, although it's unlikely. And that is the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Now, what has happened is the media is all, let's say, they're aghast. They're understandably upset over the fact that Khashoggi has disappeared. What happened is Khashoggi was a prominent opposition journalist, if you will, or critic of the Saudi royal family, and even the Crown Prince Salman, who runs the country now effectively. And what happened was he went to a consulate in Istanbul to get proof that he had divorced his wife and was eligible to marry, and they told him he could come get the papers, and he went in there and he never came out. Video footage shows that he never left the embassy. And according to some reports, as many as 15 different Saudi personnel came into the country just before the incident and left shortly after. They included a colonel in Saudi intelligence, in counterterrorism. They included a forensic specialist. They included the types of people that you would essentially put together for a hit squad, let's be honest about it. Somewhat similar to what Israel did in Mossad when they went in and assassinated Hezbollah's chief weapons supplier in the city of Dubai. Now, this particular disappearance or murder of this journalist is rather complicated because it's a little more involved, let's say, than just somebody getting mad at a reporter and killing him, which is still an inexcusable crime. Now, first of all, ironically, this happened in Turkey. Turkey holds the record for imprisoning the most journalists, period. They've surpassed communist China in that infamous front. And Erdogan, the dictator of Turkey, has imprisoned journalists by the hundreds ever since he has clamped down ever since the coup that was launched against him that was unsuccessful to topple him. He's used that as an excuse to go after his critics. So he shut down a lot of independent media. He has harassed or imprisoned hundreds of journalists, some of whom are being tried with charges of terrorism, which he's now asking for the death penalty for. So Erdogan now has a murder on his own soil. The problem is that the Saudis are one of his largest investors. Now, let's talk about Khashoggi. When I heard about Khashoggi, I immediately recognized the name. As a longtime analyst in counterterrorism intelligence, I recognized him back in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of 9/11. We have to remember that in the aftermath of those terrorist attacks, the U.S. government had evidence of Saudi involvement. Now, that doesn't mean that the king of Saudi Arabia ordered the terrorists to attack. That's not the case. But there were members of the royal family who obviously were funding al-Qaeda. Khashoggi was a fan of Osama bin Laden. He only distanced himself from bin Laden when the attacks of 9/11 occurred. Otherwise, he didn't have a problem with bin Laden. And I have a problem with Khashoggi over that. So when I hear that Khashoggi was a moderate, a reformist, somebody who wanted genuine freedom and democracy in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, I'm sorry, that's just not the truth. That is BS. If anything, Khashoggi was a critic of the Saudi royal family, yes, and Wahhabism. This is the radical extremist form of Islam that Saudi Arabia practices. But he is not a freedom-loving Western-type democratic proponent, not even close. In fact, he not only supports the Muslim Brotherhood, which advocates world conquest and submission of the world, forcing it to live under the draconian Sharia laws, but again, he supported bin Laden even after he formed Al-Qaeda, part of which was to attack the Saudi royal family and get rid of them until the attacks of 9/11. So again, it gets very convoluted here because we have to remember that there's a complicated chess game in the Middle East that's going on here. Some of the funding for Khashoggi's activities have come from Qatar, who is aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, and Turkey is a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. Russia and Iran and Syria and China are now following this very carefully, as is the Trump administration, because if the Saudis had this guy killed, although he was a journalist, it really was more in the lines of him being a political opponent because he had just formed a political party to attack the Saudi royal family. And if you do that, you don't have a long life. If you're going to be a Saudi, they're going to hunt you down and get you if you're trying to oust the government or overthrow it. Because we must remember in Saudi Arabia, criticism of the government is not allowed. Now, I will tell you that having been in the Middle East and having been to some of these countries where they have the dictators, the emirs and so on, you don't really have any real freedoms. It's one of the reasons I decided not to work for a newspaper there after Daily World has started a Dubai edition. I wanted to try to partner with a paper in Dubai, but it was very clear that my boss was going to be the ruler of the country, and I had no recourse, and I'm Jewish. It wasn't going to work. So this thing with Khashoggi is very complicated. We're going to learn the truth eventually. It is unfortunate he has been killed. It's inexcusable, especially if he was hacked to death, but it's a lot more complicated than people think. In the meantime, the world needs to stop and avoid the killing of journalists, and the international community needs to put a halt to this, but it's not going to. We'll be back next week.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, Keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.